Commander Jake Morrison stood at the center of the bridge, watching the stars drift past through the main viewport. The exploration ship Liberty's Edge had been traveling through space for 3 weeks now, heading toward the neutral zone between human space and the territory of an alien race called the Kethari. This was supposed to be a peaceful mission, the first real diplomatic meeting between humans and the insect-like aliens, who had been watching human colonies from a distance for months. Jake felt nervous energy running through his crew. Everyone knew this mission could change everything. First contact with a new alien species was always dangerous, but the Kethari had been different from the start. Unlike other aliens humans had met, the Kethari had never tried to communicate. They just watched. Their ships would appear near human colonies, observe for days or weeks, then disappear without a word. Dr. Lisa Carter walked onto the bridge, carrying her tablet filled with research notes. She was the ship's expert on alien biology and had spent months studying what little information they had about the Kethari. Lisa was a small woman with brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. While everyone else seemed worried about the meeting, she looked excited. "Any sign of them yet?" Lisa asked, moving to stand beside Jake at the command console. "Not yet," Jake replied. "But we're right where they said they'd meet us. The neutral zone marker is just ahead." The communication officer, a young man named Tony Martinez, suddenly straightened in his chair. "Commander, I'm picking up something on long-range sensors. It's big." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Show me." The main screen changed to display sensor readings. A massive shape was moving toward them from deeper in space. As they watched, the shape grew larger and more detailed. It was a ship, but unlike anything humans had ever built. The vessel was dark and angular, covered in what looked like spikes and armor plating. It was easily 3 times the size of Liberty's Edge. "That's definitely Kethari design," Lisa said, studying the image with fascination rather than fear. "Look at those patterns on the hull. They're similar to the markings we've seen on insect wings and shells." Before anyone could respond, the alien ship simply appeared in front of them. One moment the view screen showed empty space. The next moment the enormous vessel filled their view. Several crew members jumped or gasped. The ship had some kind of cloaking technology that made it invisible until it chose to reveal itself. "They were watching us the whole time," Jake said quietly, "probably studying how we react." The alien ship was beautiful in a terrifying way. Its surface seemed to shimmer like black metal, and strange lights pulsed along its length. Weapon ports were clearly visible, and Jake could see what looked like launch bays for smaller fighter craft. This was not just a diplomatic vessel. This was a warship. "Incoming transmission," Tony announced. "Audio only." "Put it through," Jake ordered. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect English but with an odd clicking quality that made everyone's skin crawl. "Human vessel. You will prepare to receive a delegation from the Kethari Empire. We come to speak of your future. Do not attempt to flee or resist. Such actions would be unwise." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. "Well, Lisa said cheerfully, at least they speak our language." Jake looked at her in amazement. How could she be so calm? "Lisa, did you hear the way that sounded? They weren't asking for permission to come aboard. They were telling us what was going to happen." "I heard it," Lisa replied. "But think about what we can learn from this. They've been studying us long. Enough to master our language perfectly. They understand our technology well enough to find us out here. And they're confident enough to make demands instead of requests. This tells us a lot about their culture and psychology." Before Jake could answer, the ship's sensors detected movement from the alien vessel. A smaller craft detached from the main ship and moved toward Liberty's Edge. It was sleek and predatory looking, like a giant insect flying through space. "They're heading for our main docking bay," reported the navigation officer, Amy Torres. Should I try to redirect them to a smaller port? Jake shook his head. No. If we start changing things now, it might look like we're afraid or trying to trick them. Open the main bay and prepare to receive visitors. As the crew prepared for the aliens' arrival, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Everything about this encounter felt wrong. The Cathari had all the advantages. They had the bigger ship, better technology, and they had been watching humans while remaining hidden themselves. Now they were coming aboard as if they owned the place. Lisa seemed to read his thoughts. Jake, remember that they asked for this meeting too. If they just wanted to destroy us, they could have done it already. They want something from us, which means we have some kind of power in this situation. I hope you're right, Jake replied. The alien shuttle docked with a sound like metal claws scraping against the hull. Through the security cameras, they watched as the docking bay doors opened. What emerged made several crew members step back. From their monitors, the Cathari were even more impressive and frightening in person than in the blurry photographs from long distance observations. They looked like a cross between giant insects and armored warriors. The leader was clearly female and stood nearly 9 feet tall. Her body was covered in what looked like natural armor, black and shining like polished metal. Her head was elongated, with large compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Sharp mandibles moved slightly as she breathed, and her arms ended in hands that had both fingers and retractable claws. Behind her came 4 other Cathari, each nearly as large and intimidating. They moved with a fluid grace that reminded everyone watching of hunting spiders or praying mantises. Every movement seemed calculated and dangerous. My God, whispered Amy Torres. They're magnificent. And terrifying, added Tony Martinez. Lisa leaned forward, studying the aliens with intense interest. Look at the way they move. Perfect coordination, constant awareness of their surroundings. And see those markings on their armor? I think those indicate rank or specialization. The lead Cathari looked directly at one of the security cameras, as if she knew exactly where it was and who was watching. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the communication system. I am War Empress Zixandra of the Cathari Empire. I have come to speak with your leaders about the future of your species. You will escort us to a meeting place immediately. Jake took a deep breath. I'm Commander Jake Morrison of the human exploration vessel Liberty's Edge. Welcome aboard. We're honored by your visit and ready to begin discussions. There was a pause before Zixandra replied. Honor is earned through strength, human. We shall see if your species possesses anything worthy of honor. Lead us to your conference room. We have much to discuss about your survival. The way she said the word survival made it clear that humanity's continued existence was very much in question. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. Lisa gave him an encouraging nod. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Amy, you and Tony stay here and monitor the ship. Lisa, you're with me. Let's go meet our guests. As they left the bridge, Jake couldn't help but wonder if they were walking toward the most important conversation in human history, or toward their doom. Jake Morrison and Lisa Carter walked through the corridors of Liberty's Edge toward the main conference room. The ship felt different now, knowing that 5 deadly aliens were aboard. The usual sounds of the vessel seemed quieter, and every member they passed looked tense and worried. Remember, Jake said quietly to Lisa as they approached the conference room, let me do most of the talking. We don't know how they'll react to direct questions or scientific curiosity. Lisa nodded, but Jake could see the excitement in her eyes. For her, this was the discovery of a lifetime. For him, it felt like walking into a lion's den. The conference room doors opened, and Jake got his first close look at the Cathari delegation. War Empress Zixandra dominated the space, even though she was sitting down. Her massive form filled The chair at the far end of the table and her compound eyes seemed to track every movement Jake and Lisa made as they entered. The other four, Cathari, stood behind her like living statues. They were perfectly still, but Jake could sense the coiled violence in their posture. These were not diplomats. These were warriors who could probably tear apart the conference room with their bare hands. "Sit," Zixandra commanded, her mandibles clicking as she spoke. "We have much to discuss about the weakness of your species." Jake took the chair across from her, with Lisa sitting beside him. The table between them suddenly seemed very small. "We appreciate this opportunity to establish relations between our peoples," Jake began carefully. "Humanity has always sought peaceful contact with other intelligent species." Zixandra's compound eyes seemed to shine with something that might have been amusement. "Peace, yes, we have observed this about your kind. You speak of peace while your colonies spread across the galaxy like a disease. You claim to seek harmony while you strip resources from worlds that do not belong to you." "We've only colonized uninhabited worlds," Jake protested. "Worlds with no intelligent life." "Uninhabited?" Zixandra leaned forward, and Jake could see. His reflection multiplied hundreds of times in her compound eyes. "You mean worlds where the inhabitants were not strong enough to resist you? Where the native life forms could not fight back effectively? This is not peace, human. This is conquest disguised as exploration." Lisa shifted slightly in her chair, and Jake could tell she wanted to speak. But she remained silent, watching the alien leader with intense curiosity. Zixandra continued, her voice taking on a deeper, more threatening tone. "We have studied your species for many cycles. We have watched your colonies, observed your military forces, analyzed your technology. Do you know what we have concluded?" Jake didn't answer. He had a feeling he didn't want to hear this. "You are weak," Zixandra said simply. "Individually and as a species. You allow emotion to cloud your judgment. You waste resources caring for the old and sick instead of letting them die as nature intended. You risk the lives of the strong to save the weak. You make decisions based on feelings rather than logic." One of the Kefari warriors behind her made a sound that might have been laughter. It was a harsh clicking noise that made Jake's skin crawl. "This is what we have come to tell you," Zixandra continued. "Your species will submit to Cathari rule, or your species will cease to exist. There is no third option." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jake felt his mouth go dry. This wasn't a diplomatic meeting. This was an ultimatum. "You're talking about the extinction of billions of people," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Surely there's room for negotiation. Some kind of arrangement that benefits both our species." Zixandra reached across the table and picked up a metal cup that had been placed there for refreshments. She closed her hand around it, and Jake heard the sound of crushing metal. When she opened her hand, the cup had been compressed into a small ball of twisted metal. "This is negotiation," she said, dropping the crushed cup onto the table. "The strong survive, the weak are eliminated. It is the way of the universe." Lisa finally spoke up. "That's fascinating. Your hand strength must be incredible. How much pressure can you exert per square inch?" Both Jake and Zixandra turned to stare at her. Jake couldn't believe she was asking scientific questions at a time like this. Zixandra seemed equally surprised. "What did you say?" the War Empress asked. "I'm curious about your biology," Lisa said calmly. "Your species has obviously evolved some remarkable physical adaptations. That level of crushing force suggests your muscle density is far greater than what we see in human anatomy." Zixandra's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You are not afraid? Should I be?" Lisa asked. "You're definitely physically superior to humans in terms of strength and natural weapons. But fear wouldn't help me understand how your species developed such impressive capabilities." Jake watched in amazement as Zixandra seemed to lose some of her composure. The alien leader had clearly expected terror, pleas for mercy, or desperate attempts at bargaining. Lisa's calm scientific interest was obviously not part of the plan. "We are warriors," Zixandra said, her voice rising slightly. "We have conquered 17 star systems. Entire civilizations have knelt before us in terror. We are death incarnate." "That's remarkable," Lisa replied. 17 star systems means you've encountered many different species. Have you found common evolutionary patterns among intelligent life? Do most species develop similar survival strategies? One of the HFY warriors behind Zixandra made a confused clicking sound. The War Empress silenced him with a sharp gesture. "You do not understand," Zixandra said, her voice becoming more agitated. "I have just told you that your species faces extinction. I have demonstrated our power. I have explained your weakness. Why are you asking questions about evolution?" Lisa tilted her head slightly. "Because understanding is more valuable than fear. You've told us you're stronger than humans, which we already knew. You've told us you've conquered other species, which tells us about your capabilities. But I'm more interested in why you choose conquest over cooperation. What evolutionary pressures shaped your species to see strength as the only virtue?" Jake realized that something extraordinary was happening. Lisa wasn't just being brave or foolish. She was genuinely curious about the aliens, and her curiosity was completely disrupting their intimidation tactics. Zixandra stood up abruptly, her full height making her loom over the table. "You will learn fear, human. You will learn to tremble before HFY might. I will give you one rotation of your planet to demonstrate your species' worthiness. If you cannot prove that humanity deserves to survive, we will begin the elimination process." "What would constitute proof?" Lisa asked. "What would convince you that humanity is worth preserving?" The question seemed to catch Zixandra off guard again. "You must show strength. You must show that you can inspire fear in others. You must prove that you understand the natural order of the universe. And if we refuse to try?" Jake asked, Zixandra's compound eyes fixed on him. "Then you will die knowing that your weakness doomed your entire species. Your colonies will burn. Your homeworld will be reduced to ash. Your children will cry out for mercy that will never come." She gestured to her warriors, and they began moving toward the door. But before leaving, Zixandra turned back to Lisa. "You interest me, human scientist. You show no fear, but you also show no strength. You are an anomaly that we will study further. Perhaps dissecting your brain will help us understand this strange behavior." Lisa smiled. "I'd be happy to answer any questions about human neurology. Though I should mention that dissection would limit the scope of your research significantly." For the first time since entering the room, Zixandra seemed completely at a loss for words. 24 of your hours," she said finally. "Prove your worth, or face extinction." The HFY delegation left the conference room, leaving Jake and Lisa alone with the crushed metal cup and the weight of humanity's future. After the HFY delegation left the conference room, Jake Morrison sat in stunned silence. The crushed metal cup on the table reminded him of just how serious their situation was. Humanity had 24 hours to prove they were worthy of survival, and he had no idea what that even meant. "Lisa," he said finally, "what were you thinking in there? That alien could have killed you with one hand." Lisa Carter was still staring at the door where the aliens had exited, her eyes bright with fascination. "Jake, did you see how she reacted? When I didn't show fear, she was completely thrown off balance. That tells us something very important about their psychology." "It tells us you're lucky to be alive," Jake replied. "She threatened to dissect your brain." "But she didn't hurt me," Lisa pointed out. "Think about it. She has the physical power to tear this ship apart, but she's giving us 24 hours instead of just attacking. Why would a species that claims strength is everything waste time with ultimatums? Jake rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. Maybe because they want to study us first? Learn our weaknesses before they invade human space? Or maybe, Lisa said slowly, because they need something from us that they can't get by force alone. Before Jake could respond, his communication device chimed. It was a message from War Empress Zixandra herself. "Human scientist," the voice said, "you will come to our shuttle bay. I wish to examine your species more closely. Come alone." Jake started to object, but Lisa was already standing up. "This is perfect. I can learn more about them while she's studying me." "Absolutely not," Jake said firmly. "It's too dangerous. She could be planning to take you prisoner, or worse." Lisa paused at the door. "Jake, we're running out of time. In less than 24 hours, we need to give them an answer that somehow saves humanity. The only way to do that is to understand what we're really dealing with." Against his better judgment, Jake let her go. The Cathari shuttle was unlike anything Lisa had ever seen. The interior was dark and organic-looking, with walls that seemed to pulse slightly like living tissue. Strange lights provided dim illumination, and the air had a sharp, metallic smell that made her think of electrical storms. Zixandra was waiting for her in what appeared to be the main chamber. The War Empress had removed some of her armor, revealing more of her natural exoskeleton underneath. Lisa could see intricate patterns and structures that were even more complex than she had imagined. "You came," Zixandra said, sounding slightly surprised. "Even knowing that you might not return to your ship." "The risk seemed acceptable," Lisa replied honestly. "The potential for learning about your species outweighed the danger." Zixandra moved closer, her compound eyes studying Lisa from multiple angles. "This is what confuses us about your kind. You speak of acceptable risk as if death is merely an inconvenience. Do you not fear dying?" Lisa considered the question seriously. "I think about death sometimes, but I don't fear it the way you seem to expect. There are things I'm more afraid of than dying, such as living without purpose, dying without having contributed something meaningful to the universe, letting fear prevent me from discovering something important." Lisa looked around the shuttle with obvious interest. "Like this opportunity to meet you and your people." Zixandra's mandibles clicked in what Lisa was beginning to recognize as confusion. "On my homeworld, creatures that do not fear death are eliminated quickly. Fear keeps us alive. Fear makes us strong. Fear teaches us to survive. But you've survived so well that you've conquered 17 star systems," Lisa pointed out. "At what point does survival become something more than just staying alive?" The question seemed to disturb Zixandra. She moved to a wall panel and activated what appeared to be a display screen. Images began flowing across it, showing scenes of destruction and conquest. "These are the worlds we have taken," Zixandra said. "Each one taught us about strength and weakness. Each one proved that only the strong deserve to survive." Lisa watched the images with scientific detachment. She saw burning cities, fleeing populations, and the aftermath of battles. But she also noticed something else. "These species all seem to have been relatively peaceful before you arrived," she observed. "Most of these cities show signs of art, culture, and advanced technology. They weren't primitive savages." "They were weak," Zixandra replied firmly. "They had grown soft with comfort and cooperation. They had forgotten the harsh lessons of survival." "Or maybe they had learned different lessons," Lisa suggested. "Maybe they had evolved beyond the need for constant conflict." Zixandra turned to face her directly. "You speak as if there is value in weakness, as if cooperation and softness are strengths rather than failures." Lisa nodded. "That's exactly what I'm saying. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. On Earth, the most successful species are always the strongest predators. They're often the ones that learn to work together, to care for their young, to share resources and knowledge. Insects work together," Zixandra said dismissively. But only within rigid hierarchies based on strength and function. The queen rules because she is strongest. The workers serve because they are weakest. But what happens to your species when the queen dies? Lisa asked. What happens when the strongest individual is gone? For the first time, Zixandra seemed genuinely uncertain. Another takes her place, the strongest of those who remain. And how much knowledge is lost in that transition? How much wisdom dies? With each queen? How much potential is wasted in the constant fighting for dominance? Lisa could see that her questions were having an effect. Zixandra's posture had become less aggressive and more thoughtful. Among humans, Lisa continued, we preserve knowledge across generations. We build on what came before. A human scientist can benefit from the discoveries of scientists who died centuries ago. Our weakness, as you call it, allows us to grow stronger over time rather than starting over with each new leader. Zixandra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its commanding tone. You are suggesting that your species' refusal to eliminate the weak is actually a form of strength? I'm suggesting that strength and weakness aren't as simple as physical power, Lisa replied. A parent who sacrifices for their child, a scientist who shares their discoveries freely, a soldier who dies protecting others, they're all demonstrating forms of strength that don't involve domination or fear. But they die, Zixandra pointed out. The parent who sacrifices is eliminated. The scientist who shares knowledge gives advantages to competitors. The soldier who protects others cannot protect himself. They die as individuals, Lisa agreed. But what they fought for survives. Their children live to carry on their legacy. Their knowledge benefits everyone. The people they protected continue to build and create and discover. Zixandra began pacing around the chamber, her movements showing signs of agitation. This makes no sense. In nature, the individual's survival is paramount. Everything else is secondary, is it? Lisa asked. What about your own species? You mentioned that workers serve the queen. They sacrifice their individual desires for the good of the hive. Isn't that exactly the kind of behavior you're criticizing in humans? The War Empress stopped pacing abruptly. That is different. That is natural order. That is how we evolved. And maybe cooperation and caring for others is how humans evolved, Lisa said gently. Maybe what you see as weakness is actually our greatest evolutionary advantage. Zixandra was silent for a long time, her compound eyes reflecting the strange lights of the shuttle. Finally, she spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. If this is true, then everything we believe about strength and survival is wrong. Lisa felt a moment of genuine sympathy for the alien leader. Not wrong necessarily, just incomplete. Your species found one path to survival and success. Humans found another. Maybe there's room in the universe for both approaches. The others will not accept this, Zixandra said, gesturing toward where her warriors waited. They will see any deviation from our beliefs as weakness that must be eliminated. Then maybe. Lisa said carefully, the real question isn't whether humans are strong enough to survive. Maybe the question is whether you're strong enough to consider a different definition of strength. The War Empress looked at Lisa with something that might have been respect or fear or both. Lisa Carter returned to Liberty's Edge with her mind racing. Her conversation with War Empress Zixandra had revealed something important. The Kethari weren't just conquerors driven by bloodlust. They were a species trapped by their own beliefs about strength and survival. And for the first time in her life, Zixandra was beginning to question those beliefs. Jake Morrison was waiting for her in the corridor outside the docking bay. Thank God you're back. I was ready to send a rescue team. That wouldn't have been necessary, Lisa said. I think Zixandra is more confused than dangerous right now, at least where humans are concerned. Confused how? Lisa explained what had happened during her time on the Kethari shuttle. She told Jake about Zixandra's reaction to human concepts of cooperation and sacrifice, and how the War Empress had seemed genuinely disturbed by the idea that strength might mean something other than physical dominance. "So what do we do now?" Jake asked. "We still have less than 18 hours to give her an answer that saves humanity." "I have an idea," Lisa said. "But it's going to require the entire crew to participate, and it might seem crazy." Jake looked at her skeptically. "Crazier than having a friendly chat with aliens who want to exterminate our species." "We're going to show them what human strength really looks like," Lisa explained. "Not by fighting or threatening or trying to intimidate them. We're going to show them something they've never seen before in all their conquests." 2 hours later, the crew of Liberty's Edge gathered in the main conference room. Jake had called everyone together, from the senior officers to the maintenance staff. 38 people in total, representing the best of human space exploration. Jake stood at the front of the room, with Lisa beside him. Through the viewport, they could see the massive HFY warship hanging in space like a dark omen. "Everyone knows our situation," Jake began. "In 16 hours, War Empress Zixandra expects us to prove that humanity deserves to survive. She wants us to demonstrate strength according to her definition. But Dr. Carter has a different idea." Lisa stepped forward. "The Cathari understand physical strength and military power, but they don't understand the kind of strength that makes humans unique. They've conquered 17 civilizations by inspiring fear and demanding submission. They've never encountered a species that finds strength in vulnerability, courage in compassion, and victory in sacrifice." Chief Engineer Pete Collins raised his hand. "What exactly are you asking us to do, Doc?" "I'm asking you to tell your stories," Lisa replied. "The real stories about what makes you strong. Not tales of winning fights or overcoming enemies, but the moments when you chose to be vulnerable for someone else's sake. When you risked everything for something you believed in. When you found courage in the face of impossible odds." Navigation Officer Amy Torres looked confused. "How is talking about our personal lives going to save humanity?" Jake answered this time. "Because the Cathari have built their entire civilization on the idea that strength comes from inspiring fear in others. They can't understand a species that finds strength in love and sacrifice, in choosing to care about others even when it costs us everything." And, Lisa added, "War Empress Zixandra is already beginning to question her beliefs. She's never encountered anything like human nature before. If we can show her what we're really made of, it might change everything." Communications Officer Tony Martinez spoke up. "You want us to make ourselves vulnerable to aliens who are planning to wipe out our species?" "Yes," Lisa said simply. "Because that vulnerability is our greatest strength. It's what allows us to form connections, to build trust, to create something greater than ourselves. The Cathari have never learned to do that. They've survived by eliminating anything that might threaten them. But we've thrived by embracing the things that make us vulnerable." The room was quiet as the crew considered this. Finally, Senior Medical Officer Dr. Rachel Kim stood up. "I'll go first," she said. "If this is really our only chance to save humanity, then I want to try." 14 hours before the deadline, Jake sent a message to the Cathari warship. "War Empress Zixandra, we request your presence for humanity's response to your ultimatum. We are prepared to demonstrate the strength of our species." The reply came quickly. "We will attend. Prepare to show us why your species deserves to survive." An hour later, Zixandra and her 4 warriors entered the conference room again. This time, they found the entire human crew waiting for them. The aliens looked surprised by the number of people present. "You have gathered an army to threaten us?" Zixandra asked, her mandibles clicking with what might have been amusement. "These soft creatures could not harm a single Cathari warrior." "We're not here to threaten anyone," Jake replied calmly. "We're here to show you what human strength really looks like." Zixandra took her seat, gesturing for her warriors to remain standing behind her. Very well. Show us this strength you speak of. Dr. Rachel Kim stood up first. She was a small woman in her 50s, with gray hair and gentle eyes that had seen a lot of pain and healing over the years. My name is Rachel Kim, she began. I'm the chief medical officer on this ship. 5 years ago, I was working at a colony hospital when a plague broke out. We had medicine that could stop the disease, but not enough for everyone. The disease was fatal in children, but only caused mild illness in adults. Zixandra leaned forward. Slightly, her compound eyes focused on Rachel. The other doctors wanted to save the medicine for the adults, Rachel continued. They said children were a luxury we couldn't afford in a survival situation. But I gave my dose to a little girl, named Emma. Then I got sick. I almost died. You chose to weaken yourself to save another? Zixandra asked, sounding confused. I chose to save a child who had her whole life ahead of her, Rachel replied. Emma survived. She grew up and became a doctor herself. Last year, she saved 300 people during a medical emergency on her colony. My choice to be vulnerable, to risk my own life, created something much stronger than just one person surviving. Chief Engineer Pete Collins stood up next. He was a big man with rough hands and a quiet voice. I'm Pete Collins. 3 years ago, there was a fire in the apartment building where I lived. Everyone was evacuating, but I heard a baby crying on the 4th floor. The fire department said it was too dangerous to go back in. Pete paused, looking down at his scarred hands. I went back anyway. The building was collapsing, and I could have died. I did get burned pretty badly, but I got that baby out safely. And? Zixandra prompted, and nothing, Pete said with a shrug. The baby wasn't even mine. I didn't know the family. I just couldn't stand the thought of a child dying when I might be able to help. It wasn't about being strong or proving anything. It was just the right thing to do. One by one, the crew members stood up and shared their stories. Amy Torres talked about giving up a promotion to take care of her sick mother. Tony Martinez described how he had donated a kidney to a stranger. Security Chief Dan Murphy explained how he had chosen a career protecting others instead of pursuing wealth in the private sector. Each story was simple and personal. None of them involved violence or conquest or domination. They were all about moments when humans had chosen to be vulnerable, to sacrifice for others, to find strength in compassion rather than in fear. As the stories continued, Zixandra's posture began to change. Her aggressive stance softened. Her mandibles stopped their threatening clicking. Her compound eyes seemed to lose their predatory focus. Finally, Lisa Carter stood up. War Empress Zixandra, you asked us to prove that humanity deserves to survive. We can't prove that by your definition of strength. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the most advanced or the most feared. She looked directly at the alien leader. But we are the species that learn to find strength in caring for each other. We survive not by eliminating the weak, but by helping them become strong. We don't conquer through fear. We build through love. Lisa paused, then asked the question that would change everything. War Empress, what do you have that's worth dying for? Lisa's question hung in the air like a challenge that cut deeper than any weapon. What do you have that's worth dying for? War Empress Zixandra stared at the human scientist, her compound eyes reflecting the lights of the conference room. Behind her, the 4 Cathari warriors remained perfectly still, but Jake Morrison could sense their confusion. This was not how their intimidation sessions usually went. Double quotes Zixandra began, then stopped. Her mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound the humans had learned meant she was agitated. We fight for the glory of the Cathari Empire. For the strength of our species. For victory over our enemies. But what do you personally have that's worth dying for? Lisa asked gently. Not your empire or your species or your military victories. What do you have that you would willingly give your life to protect? The War Empress opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. For several long moments, the most powerful military leader in Cathari's space sat in silence, struggling with a question she had never been asked before. I do not understand the question, she finally admitted. Dr. Rachel Kim spoke up from her seat. She's asking what you love more than your own life. What makes your existence meaningful beyond just surviving and conquering? Love. Zixandra repeated the word as if it were foreign to her. This is the weakness that drives your species to sacrifice themselves foolishly. Is it? Amy Torres asked. Is my love for my mother what made me weak when I chose to care for her? Or is it what made me strong enough to give up everything else that seemed important? Chief Engineer Pete Collins nodded. When I ran into that burning building, I wasn't thinking about being weak or strong. I was thinking about a baby who needed help. That need was more important than my fear. Zixandra looked around the room at all the human faces watching her. There was no mockery in their expressions, no judgment. They seemed genuinely curious about her answer, as if her thoughts mattered to them. On my homeworld, she said slowly, we are taught that individual desires are weakness, that personal attachments lead to poor strategic decisions, that caring about anything more than victory and survival makes a warrior vulnerable to defeat. But what did you think before you were taught that? Lisa asked. When you were young, before you became a war empress, what mattered to you? For the first time since boarding the human ship, Zixandra seemed to shrink into herself. Her imposing presence diminished as some ancient memory surfaced. There was a garden, she said quietly. On the royal grounds where I was raised, it was beautiful. Delicate plants that served no strategic purpose, no survival function. I used to spend time there, watching them grow. Her voice became even softer. I was told such interests were weakness, that a future war empress could not waste time on useless beauty. The garden was destroyed to make room for additional combat training facilities. The conference room was completely silent. Even the Cathari warriors seemed to be listening intently to their leader's words. What happened to the part of you that loved that garden? Lisa asked. Zixandra's compound eyes seemed to shimmer. It was eliminated. As all weakness must be. Eliminated. But it wasn't eliminated, Dr. Kim said gently. It's still there. You still remember it. You still feel something when you think about it. The War Empress looked up sharply. Feeling is weakness. Is it? Jake Morrison finally spoke up. Your feeling for that garden is what made you who you are underneath all the training and the conquest. It's what makes you different from your warriors. What gives you the ability to question and think and consider new ideas? If you had never loved that garden, Lisa added, you wouldn't be able to understand what we've been telling you about human nature. Your capacity to feel is what allows you to recognize feeling in others. Zixandra stood up abruptly, her full height making her tower over the seated humans. But instead of seeming threatening, she looked lost and confused. If this is true, she said, her voice shaking slightly, then everything I have built, everything I have conquered, everything I have believed about strength and survival. It is all wrong. Not wrong, Security Chief Dan Murphy said. Just incomplete. You learned one way to be strong. We learned another. Maybe there's room for both. My warriors, Zixandra gestured to the 4 aliens behind her. They follow me because they believe I am the strongest. If they discover that I have weakness, that I question our fundamental beliefs, they will challenge my authority. There will be civil war. Or, Tony Martinez suggested, maybe they're asking the same questions you are. Maybe they're tired of living in fear too. Zixandra turned to look at her warriors. Speak truthfully. Do you question our ways? The largest of the warriors, one with elaborate markings on his armor, stepped forward. War Empress, we have followed you through 17 conquests. We have seen you lead with wisdom as well as strength. If you say there are other forms of power worth considering, we will listen. Another warrior spoke up. The humans show no fear, yet they do not seem weak. This is confusing. Perhaps there is something to learn from them. Zixandra stared at her followers in amazement. You would consider changing our most sacred beliefs? We would consider following our War Empress wherever her wisdom leads, the first warrior replied, even if that path is unfamiliar. Lisa Carter smiled. You see? Even among your own people, strength doesn't have to mean isolation and fear. It can mean trust and loyalty and the courage to explore new ideas together. The War Empress walked slowly around the conference table, looking at each human face. If I accept what you have shown me, if I believe that strength can come from vulnerability and caring, what happens to the Cathari Empire? How do we change a civilization built on conquest and domination? The same way you change anything, Pete Collins said. One step at a time, one choice at a time. One garden at a time. Zixandra stopped walking and stared at him. One garden at a time? Start with something small, he explained. Something beautiful that serves no military purpose. Show your people that there's value in creation as well as destruction. That protecting something fragile can require more courage than destroying something strong. Jake Morrison stood up. War Empress, humanity offers you an alliance built on mutual respect, rather than domination. We have much to learn from each other. Your people's strength and determination, combined with our cooperation and compassion, could create something neither species could achieve alone. Zixandra looked around the room one more time, then back at her own warriors. I came here demanding fear. Instead, you have shown me something I thought was lost forever. What's that? Lisa asked. Hope, Zixandra replied. Hope that there is another way to live. Another way to be strong. Another way to find meaning in existence beyond mere survival. She reached into her armor and pulled out a small communication device. After activating it, she spoke in the Klickin Cathari language to her fleet. The humans couldn't understand the words, but they could hear the change in her tone. Where before there had been command and threat, now there was something else. Something that sounded almost like wonder. When she finished, she looked at Jake. Morrison, I have called off the attack. Humanity will not be destroyed today. Instead, we will try this new path you have shown us. She paused, then added quietly, and I will plant a new garden. One where both our species can learn to grow together. Dr. Lisa Carter stepped forward and, to everyone's surprise, extended her hand to the massive alien leader. Welcome to the family, Zixandra. Welcome to the family. The War Empress looked at the offered hand for a moment, then carefully reached out with one clawed finger to touch Lisa's palm. It was the gentlest gesture any human had ever seen from a Cathari. Thank you, Zixandra whispered, for teaching me that true strength is not about making others tremble. It is about having something so precious that you would tremble at the thought of losing it. Outside the conference room viewport, the massive Cathari fleet began powering down their weapons. In the distance, stars continued their eternal dance, but now they shone on a universe where two very different species had found a way to be strong together.